Desert Oracle Radio. The voice of the desert.
Night has fallen on the desert. A cool springtime in the Mojave Desert. The hummingbirds are lingering on the branches of creosote and catclaw, looking around for the flowers. Where are the flowers? Well, that's always the guessing game up here, isn't it? Sometimes they're evident by the end of March. Sometimes it's the beginning of May. Varies by terrain, by altitude, by 100 little differences from spring to spring in this forward motion of our lives. Spring forward. I saw my first rattlesnake of the season walking in the hills at sundown the other day. I was walking in the hills, anyway. But the snake was not moving. Before I got close, I knew it wasn't the way I prefer to see such creatures, because it was already chilly out, 55 degrees or so, chilly and overcast with the last muted rays of sunlight fading fast. There was a motorcycle track right over this snake of maybe a foot long. It was dead just for crossing the 6 feet of sandy dirt road next to where it woke up. I kept walking, troubled by the likelihood that the death was intentional. Remembering talking to this kid who lived behind my place up in Reno many years ago, bragging about running over rattlesnakes. There's something dumb and mean in certain people, something that makes them zero in on a harmless reptile moving slowly across the desert floor, a reptile that could not hurt you unless you really made an effort. A snake that small could not open its mouth wide enough to get around your big toe, your thumb. At that size, they live by necessity off the smallest living things around. Tiny lizards, various insects, the small eggs and young of small birds. They go after smaller baby snakes, too. If you spend any amount of time wandering the desert, you know there's hardly an abundance of prey at ground level or anywhere else. You know, it's really bad karma, as they say, to intentionally kill any kind of wildlife that you're not hunting for the purpose of food or fur. So I don't need to wish ill upon the snake killer as that person staggers upon the earth without the grace of God, without the blessings of beauty. It'll only get dumber for them, and they'll likely never know why. Back at home, I make the rounds of the property, picking up some windblown trash here and there, fast food wrappers, junk mail from 2 zip codes west that blew over, cracked and brittle picnic plates shedding their microplastics, the usual garbage. There is an enormous non-native tree out there, grown fat and tall on the easy groundwater just below in this desert valley, and within these densely leaved eucalyptus branches, I hear the bedtime chatter of 100 birds. Everybody goes up there at night, safe as milk. I know their voices, many of them anyway. the quail, the doves, the many songbirds who spend their spring times here. And way up high, I hear the voice that silences all the rest. The great horned owl. There are many rooms in the mansion.
Desert Oracle Radio.
This is Desert Oracle Radio with soundscapes by Red, Blue, Black, Silver. We've talked about the Delphic maxims on this program before, those carved in stone wisdom sayings that ancient visitors to the oracle at Delphi would see along the pathways and upon the walls of the temples. Follow Zeus, follow divinity. Obey law, obey custom. Know thyself. Respect your parents. Practice nobility of mind and body. Speak plainly. Treat yourself well. Be cheerful to all. Protect friendship. Rules of thumb, you could say, basic morals, yes, but also good everyday advice. Act without overthinking it. Don't be distressed. Pursue wisdom, pursue honor. Respect your ancestors. Do not curse your sons. Collections of wisdom sayings were treasured throughout the ancient world. At the Louvre, you can see the dialogue between a man and his god, a single tablet of Akkadian wisdom text put down in clay 37 centuries ago. That's 16 and 64 BC. It's a dialogue between man and God, just like it says. It opens like this. A young man was weeping to his God like a friend, constantly praying. His heart was aflame, his toil grim. His liver was grieving from its suffering. His toil has become too heavy for him. He brays like the weaned foal of a donkey. By the end of the tablet's text, the sad young man has been strengthened and encouraged by his creator, his God. Gird your loins, do not be dispirited. Go in and out of it and prosper. The oldest such maxims come from the oldest civilization, ancient Egypt. And then there is the rich wisdom literature of China and India, of Confucius and the Buddha. And in the same centuries that the Delphic maxims were known and revered and widely attributed to the seven sages of Hellas, collections of sayings we now call the Book of Proverbs played a similar role in the culture and religion of the Levant and ancient Israel in particular. A collection of collections in its present-day form, Proverbs begins with a claim that it comes from King Solomon himself, the wisest of them all. Speaking of Solomon and his famed temple built to hold the Ark of the Covenant, have you ever thought about the fabled Ark when you're visiting New Jersey's biggest city? Think about it, as Jerry Lee Lewis often said. Newark means new ark, as in New Ark of the Covenant. Newark was founded in 1666 AD as a Puritan colony that branched out from New Haven. Anyway, a listener in Moab, Utah was doing some Bible study and came across this proverb that might be of interest to those who appreciate the desert wilderness. It is better to live alone in the desert than with an angry and argumentative wife. Proverbs 21:19. That's kind of a Rodney Dangerfield line, especially when you read all of Proverbs 21 and see some of the other zingers. Better to live on a corner of the roof than share a house with a quarrelsome wife. That's verse 9. A corner of the roof? I guess it depends on the time of year. What about a quarrelsome husband? Well, this is attributed to King Solomon, who did have 300 wives. Haughty eyes and a proud heart, the unplowed field of the wicked produce sin. The plans of the diligent lead to profit as surely as haste leads to poverty. A fortune made by a lying tongue is a fleeting vapor and a deadly snare. The violence of the wicked will drag them away, for they refuse to do what is right. The way of the guilty is devious, but the conduct of the innocent is upright. This one, verse 21, also from this chapter 21 we're looking at now, is pretty interesting. Whoever shuts their ears to the cry of the poor will also cry out and not be answered. This proverb echoes both the Delphic maxims and the Akkadian dialogue. Must be some truth in it. Back in 1875, 150 years ago, a talented young doctor arrived in the desert Southwest. Like so many before and after, this man had come to the Southwest for the clean, dry air and ample sunshine. He had caught tuberculosis while caring for his mother, who died from that affliction when he was only 15 years old. He was what they called a lunger. But despite his illness, this young man, John Henry Holliday, cut a handsome figure, a lean 5'10" with sparkling blue eyes and ash blonde hair. There was no cure for tuberculosis, nothing beyond going west for the healthful climate. The same climate that brought a young J. Robert Oppenheimer to New Mexico in the early 20th century when he first saw the ranch school at Los Alamos. The same high-altitude boarding school attended by elite boys, including Gore Vidal and William S. Burroughs. But things were not so settled in the 1870s. New Mexico, Arizona, and Utah were still territories, as were the as yet unsplit Dakotas, Idaho, Montana, Washington, Wyoming. As always, such places attracted the adventurers, the brave, the desperate, runaway boys and girls of all kinds. Usually the sinning kind. Law was a very basic matter in the territorial Old West. Land and cattle, mining claims, and murder, that was about it. Those were the primary concerns. There was no overreaching state infrastructure to prosecute people for gambling, for working at a house of prostitution. And this is the world that attracted John Henry Holliday, born in Griffin, Georgia, to parents of English and Scottish blood. He had given up his medical practice, dentistry to be specific, because he was too sick, already marked for an early grave before he came of age as a man. Despite his medical abilities, by his 22nd year, he could not even fit a patient for false teeth without collapsing into a coughing fit. Which is why he abandoned his successful practice in Dallas and headed for the territories. Being of exceptional intelligence and charm and having acquired a good education, the former dentist, known as Doc Holliday, was about 22 when he arrived in the Mountain West, determined to make his living as a gambler. He worked the saloons and card rooms in Denver before heading up to Deadwood and then Cheyenne and then to Dodge City, where he was feeling up to practicing dentistry again. The June 18th, 1878 edition of the Dodge City Times ran this advertisement. Dentistry. J.H. Holliday, dentist, very respectfully offers his professional services to the citizens of Dodge City and the surrounding country during the summer. Office at room number 24, Dodge House. Where satisfaction is not given, money will be refunded. During these years of gambling and wandering and occasional dentistry, Doc Holliday got into a number of violent disputes. One of these occurred when he dove into a saloon brawl to help a man named Wyatt Earp, the beginning of their lifelong friendship. For the rest of Doc's life, his hot temper and surgical skill with firearms would get him into trouble time and again. After numerous gunfights and arrests, none of which stuck, Holliday settled for a while in beautiful Las Vegas, the real one in New Mexico. That's where he reconnected with Wyatt Earp. That's when they first made plans to go to Arizona together. Eventually to the mining boomtown of Tombstone in the breathtaking country of Cochise County, the San Pedro River Valley. As for what happened in Deadwood, there are many good and bad books on the subject, and twice as many movies and television shows about the OK Corral gunfight and its colorful characters. I'd recommend the 1993 movie Tombstone if you don't already know it, especially the first 90 minutes or so. Although the last scene is worth your time, too. It's fictionalized like everything about the murky real-life details of Doc Holliday and his gunfighter friends. But you will see no better version of Doc than the one performed by Val Kilmer, who passed away this week at the age of 65. The most satisfying way to learn about this brief, wild period of the Old West is to travel to these places. And don't worry if it's touristy, especially if you're there as a tourist. You can always take a nice walk at a nearby state park or nature preserve or whatever open space they've got. And there's always open space in the desert Southwest and the Intermountain West. In Prescott, get yourself over to 100 South Montezuma. That's directly across from the lovely Courthouse Square, with its trees and grass and pleasant walking paths. Doc Holliday lived and worked right there at 100 South Montezuma on Whiskey Row. And there's now a historical plaque to mark the spot. Make sure you read the whole thing. It's only about 30 words or so. You can do it. Then step into a saloon. They're all around there. And wet your whistle and watch the people. Try watching the people like good old Doc Holliday used to do. But don't shoot anybody unless there's really no way around it. Or unless you get real mad. The historic Delaware Hotel in Leadville, Colorado is another spot Holliday was known to call home, at least for a little while. It stands proud today at Harrison Avenue and East 7th Street, just 3 picturesque blocks north of the legendary Silver Dollar Saloon where Doc regularly gambled during his Leadville days. They like to play Faro there. F-A-R-O. Cursed card game. And while the Glenwood Springs Health Resort, where Doc died at age 36, no longer stands, there's an easy trail from Bennett Avenue and 12th Street that goes right up the hill through a pretty forest and then to Doc Holliday's grave. Whether he's really under it or not is, like everything about Holliday, a mystery. But this is where most accounts say he was buried, with the obelisk and historical marker first erected in the 1950s and then redone just 20 years ago in 2004. Doc Holliday is not buried at Tombstone's Boot Hill Cemetery, that much seems certain. But maybe Val Kilmer will be buried there. That's a possibility.
I'm your huckleberry.
After the long and difficult production of the movie Tombstone, Kurt Russell, who played Wyatt Earp, presented Val Kilmer with a gift. A graveyard plot at Boot Hill. And Kilmer, it turns out, had chosen a similar gift for Russell. An acre of tombstone land overlooking Boot Hill Cemetery. So maybe someday you'll be visiting Tombstone with the kids, trying to get them to look up from their phones long enough to see the historic old town. And Kurt Russell might be up there on his property looking down on the best to ever play John Henry Doc Holliday. Oh, and here's your nature trivia for the night. Now that it's springtime and we're starting to hear the crickets of the night again, here's an interesting fact I just learned myself, really sort of did a number on my mind. The chirp of the cricket is a clock that tells the temperature. Next time you hear the crickets, look at your watch and count the number of chirps in 1 minute. Now add 40. That's the temperature in Fahrenheit. So if you count a dozen chirps in a minute, it's 52 degrees. Getting a little bit chilly, nearly time for the crickets to go to bed. I learned this from a Twitter account that consists of the letter T and a picture of an 8-ball, so of course I had to seek scientific validation of this claim, and it's true. God is in the details, as they say. In springtime, we are surrounded with the wonderful vitality of life, even in the desert, especially in the desert. When a parched hillside of sharp-ended rocks and occasional thorns is transformed into a carpet of brilliant yellow wildflowers under a brilliant blue sky. I see the hummingbirds and their aerobatic mating dances, the Mojave cottontails bopping around with another several babies every few weeks, the sudden appearance of the tiniest new lizards. Good night from the voice of the desert.